1, 2, and 3.
If you had to choose, and you have to choose, you can't say both, is education for the individual or society?
I'm not sure I quite understand your question.
A lot of people argue that education is a merit good, that it's for the individual, it's for the benefit of the individual. There's this figure of 100,000 being bandied around at the moment that a graduate achieves on their income on average over their lifetime.
I think, aren't they supposed to pay 100,000 extra in tax over their life? But anyway, yeah.
But basically I'm asking you about your philosophy. Do you believe that higher education is for the benefit of the individual or for society?
Well, my cop-out answer would be both, because I don't think it's as straightforward as to say it's one or the other. But it is absolutely clear that we need to properly train lots of clever people to do the jobs that we need within society. That said, I do think the individual should have that opportunity to improve themselves. So higher education is important for both, and I suppose you could say overall it's more important for society because it's important that you get not just one individual with a great education but a whole host of individuals with a great education so that they can fill the kind of jobs and positions that we need around the country. But I don't think you can say it's one or the other. It's got to be both.
Mm-hmm.
Right, there's a question over there.
You seem to speak a lot about re-election and how the Lib Dems are looking at the next election when it's only the first year in government at the moment. And recent polls do suggest that the Lib Dems' popularity has slumped. Would the Lib Dems be willing say for instance this one issue of education right now, and a couple of other issues do arise, would the Lib Dems be willing to step aside from the government and possibly have to form a new one?
I really don't know the answer to that question. From the party's perspective, having gone into the coalition, I actually think for the health of the party, they've got to see it through. I think it would be potentially very dangerous for us to leave the coalition and for us to end up with another general election in a few weeks' time. Particularly in view of the comprehensive spending review that's coming out this coming week. So I think we have got to assume and we've got to work towards this being a coalition for a 5-year term. And that was the decision of when the coalition was agreed with the Tories, was that it was for a 5-year period, but only for a 5-year period. What was the other part of your question?
Well, basically the idea...
Oh, you said about the polls, yeah, that was that. I don't pay much attention to any of the polls other than ICM. And in the ICM polls, we've consistently been about 18%. If you look at our polls straight after the election in 2005, our poll ratings always slump straight after an election, but I'm certainly not complacent over that because I think there is definitely the case that we've taken a hit. The Tories, if you look at the things that have the things that the coalition government has put forward, I actually think we are responsible for improving a significant number of those policies, but we're not getting the benefit at the moment. It's the Tories that are getting the benefit out of it, and the Labour Party just opposing everything that are getting the benefit out of it. But I'm hopeful that will change over time. I think there is an issue about the polls at the moment. News International are doing a daily poll through YouGov, and I think there's a real issue with the way they weight their polls, because there's a lot of people around the time of the general election who said that they were going to vote Liberal Democrat and then didn't. And when polls are carried out and people try and recall how they vote, they often don't recall how they voted. So I think there will be a significantly larger number of people who are recalling that they voted Liberal Democrat, but actually they didn't vote Liberal Democrat at all in the end, because there is no doubt in the last 2 or 3 days before the election, we lost a whole host of people who were going to vote for us. So I think the YouGov polls that are really bad, that have got us down on 12% of the votes, are just a nonsense, and I only pay any attention to the ICM ones. But yes, it's, you know, I would like to think that our poll rating had gone up and that we'd got some credit for some of the things that some of the good things that have happened, but at the moment it's just not happening. And I think, again, that's to do with the fact that coalitions are new in this country. So we're getting all the blame and none of the credit.
Right, a few questions. Just to reiterate, guys, there's a diverse range of people here. I'm sure you have a diverse range of questions, so asking about anything. It doesn't just have to be about the coalition, tell me about anything. Question over there?
Thinking about free schools and academies, given that the Labour Education Minister in the 1970s abolished the tripartite education system because it was a meritocratic tool of social mobility, doesn't that system present a desirable alternative to the academies and free schools presently espoused by the Conservative Party?
Possibly. Maybe we should sit down and you should put that to me in a bit more detail, and then I'll be able to make a better judgment on that.
There's a question over here.
Recently, Lib Dem leaders have given varying answers over this, but do you see Lib Dems as a party of the centre-left or centre-right?
I see the Liberal Democrats as a party of the centre-left. I believe that the vast majority of our activists, councillors and MPs see themselves as a party of the centre-left. I think one of the issues is to do with issues surrounding civil liberties, and so there are some people who are libertarians who are actually incredibly right-wing. But I think if you looked at all our MPs, 57 MPs that we've got, and asked what their position was on any host of issues, the vast majority, if not all, but certainly the vast majority, you'd put on the centre-left. But I think there has been a bit of a blurring of what is left and what is right as well over the last few years. And I mean, it's interesting. I always think it's interesting to look at the new intake of MPs. There's quite a lot of MPs who've been elected for the Tories this time round, who, if it had been in 1997, they would have been Labour MPs. And you know, I was brought up under Thatcher, so most people of my generation didn't like Margaret Thatcher and were therefore joined the Labour Party. I didn't. In fact, I didn't join the party until I went to university in 1990. But there were lots of people who probably have quite, you know, what you would describe as right-wing views on a number of issues. And I think civil liberty issues are a good example of that, who would have naturally been Conservatives had there been Labour in charge in the 1980s. But because the Tories were in charge, they sort of went against Margaret Thatcher, so joined the Labour Party. And now, because there's loads of people who were brought up under Tony Blair, have gone to the Tories, who perhaps would, under other circumstances, have been in the Labour Party.
Right. Question taken from the back, right at the back there.
Some students for the sensible.
Sorry, can't hear you very well.
I'm here with some students for the sensible drug policy.
Right.
And we're just interested in what your opinions on current legislation is on drugs and whether you think there could be some reforms.
Well,
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Question just about what John threw essentially about whether he's in favour of drug law reform. Was that right?
I think there has to be a sensible debate about it, but whenever you have a debate about drugs, it never ends up being a sensible debate. And you know, I think Chris Davis has come in for a lot of criticism for his views on drugs, but he's making a perfectly educated argument as to his position on legalisation of cannabis, for instance. Personally, I'm not in favour of the legalisation of drugs. But on the issue of cannabis, which I think is the one that generally gets the most discussion, I actually think if you are going to change the law, it'd be more sensible to make cannabis legal rather than just decriminalising it. Because I think it would be a lot easier to control it, and you would take it completely out of the illegal environment. And also the government would make some money out of it as well. But having it decriminalised, you still end up having cannabis within that sort of environment where people then get exposed to other harder drugs as well. So I think decriminalisation is a complete waste of time. If we're going to change the law, and I'd like to see an educated debate on it, we ought to be considering legalising it rather than decriminalising it.
Damien?
I'm going to ask a question about the Browne review. At the moment, a student pays a tuition fee of something in the order of about £3,300. And on top of that, the university receives a grant from the taxpayer as well as educators. And it all amounts to around £7,000. What I don't understand about the Browne review and Vince Cable's proposals is if the imperative is to save money, how is that going to be achieved? Because the £7,000 tuition fee, though, whatever it ends up being, is all going to come from the government. So it's exactly the same amount of money going to the same universities. The only way you can hope to save money on this is vastly reducing student numbers. I simply don't understand.
Well, I think we have to wait and see exactly what Vince comes forward with, because at the moment, I mean, there's been a lot of misinformation based on what Browne has said. But bear in mind, what Browne has said and what Vince will actually propose to the government are not necessarily the same. So, for instance, under the Browne proposals, people who do very well after they leave university could end up paying less than students who don't do so well because they just pay off their loans much faster. Now, we're looking at the moment about how that can be avoided so that people, the more you earn, the more you pay. But I don't know whether it's actually going to, whether or not that will end up happening. So, in terms of the amount of money that is going to a university, I think the real danger is that universities aren't going to get any extra money. The government's not actually going to put in the extra money. It's effectively the graduates who are putting in that extra money. So, but the problem is that the universities, in order to get the Browne to agree to a big hike in fees and to get the government to agree to a big hike in fees, we're quite happy or quite prepared to take a big hit in terms of the amount that they were getting from government. That's the problem. But you've got to bear in mind, Vince has got to lose somewhere between 20 and 25% of his budget, and 70% of his budget goes on higher education. So that's the kind of scale of cutbacks in terms of funding to universities, and that the idea is that that'll be made up by graduate contributions. But